one of the things that you talked about OED trying to improve is the communication both to the public and those filing claims. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we've been taking some measures. We've been doing some proactive calling to notify people when their pandemic unemployment assistance applications are received, even if we haven't processed it yet, to try to ease their concern that we have received it. We're having some of our most experienced claims takers do outgoing calls when needed to resolve the issues. We know that people have had trouble contacting us, so we don't want those people to have to be trying to get through to us and facing busy signals or not able to reach us. So we're doing those outgoing calls. We've added phone lines and other infrastructure to our phone system to allow more people to contact us at once. And probably most importantly, we've been hiring people very rapidly and getting them trained so that we can have them answer at least some of the questions. We're also currently working on having a number of volunteers from across the state government, from the executive branch and the legislative branch, help us out by making outgoing calls to people, again, to give them at least basic information about where their claim is, even if they can't answer all the detailed technical questions that might come up.
Do you feel like that's been one of the biggest barriers for people, is just not even knowing where in the abyss their claim lies?
I think the lack of communication for some people has been a big challenge, and we hear that frustration every day. Some of this is because the processes themselves were being built. Some people filed their claims back in March before the federal programs had even been created in law. And then once they were created in law, we still had to start implementing them, creating applications, waiting for federal guidance. And while that explains the wait, for the people that don't know that have filed a claim, that are desperate to get benefits, they didn't know. And that's really what we're trying to do, is both process the benefits as quickly as possible and keep people up to date so that they at least know where they are in the process, and to the extent we can give certainty about next steps to do that.
I think one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have is, you know, I filed 10, 11 weeks ago, and there are people whose claims are getting processed that filed 2 weeks ago. Why is that?
Sure, and that's one of the things that we did early on, is to see what we could do to get the more straightforward claims processed as quickly as possible. Some of our claims require our staff, our experienced workers, to do work on them. That can include working with other states when people have wages from both states, and any number of issues can come up that require additional work. We knew that with the number of claims we were seeing, we really need to get as many claims as possible processed quickly. So we have many types of claims. If there's no potential issues, they go through very quickly. We also, as I mentioned, we've been hiring people. We can hire them and train them quickly on how to do the simple claims that don't have complicated issues. Normally, it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to train new employees, and we really sped that up given the pandemic that we're in. But it's still a case where we can get them able to do the simpler claims, but it takes a lot longer to get enough people trained up on the more complex ones.
Complex being what, for example?
There's a number of things. The more complex claims can include people that have worked in multiple states. If they've worked for the military or the federal government, we're required to coordinate through a national technology system to find out about their earnings in the other state or with the federal government. During the first few weeks of the pandemic, that national system was actually down. It wasn't working. So we weren't able to do that. And even once we get the information, the laws are much more complicated. There can also be issues where somebody files for benefits and the employer didn't report all of their wages. And sometimes that can be a big complicated investigation of deciding if someone is an employee or an independent contractor. Sometimes it was a simple matter of somebody transposing numbers, like an employer when they submitted their employer tax reports, but the wages still aren't there originally in our system, and we have to do manual work to find those and make sure they're added to the claim so the person has enough earnings to get benefits and the right amount of benefits. But there's any number of things. Those are some of the more common ones that we've seen.
And you talked about this in the phone call, but if we could just touch on, there's a lot of discrepancies, a lot of numbers being thrown around between how many claims are filed, traditional unemployment insurance versus PUA, how many of those have been processed versus how many have actually been paid out. Can you solidify and maybe more clearly and clarify, state some of those numbers?
Sure, and I'll apologize a little bit. It is a complicated system, and there's a lot of federal reporting that we have numbers available for, but it's really aimed at how the system is reporting on how it's functioning to the US Department of Labor. It doesn't always help explain where claims are in the system. And for the new pandemic unemployment assistance program, we really had to start from scratch with building any of that reporting. So what I can share, and I'm hoping that this is the type of information that is useful to kind of paint a picture of where we are. Between March 15th and May 23rd, we know that there were about 461,000 claims for benefits filed. That excludes a couple of the small, more specialized programs, but at a high level, that's a pretty accurate picture. That does not include the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And again, we're still working on the reporting to have those numbers. Of those claims, we have processed 93% of them. So we're getting the initial claims, as you kind of pointed out, the straightforward ones are going through very quickly. There are still some issues where a claim might be processed, but people aren't receiving benefits yet. And we're also focused on resolving those issues when they're there. I think one of the keys is that we know that there's people that haven't yet received their benefits, and we're really focused on helping them. In the past couple months, we have managed to get over $1.5 billion to benefits out to people. So that's a lot of people that are being helped, and now we're focused on getting to everybody that's still waiting.
But process doesn't mean paid out. About like 55% of claims have actually been paid out. Does that number still stand true?
So for about a week ago, those were the numbers. So they've all changed a little bit since then. And I do want to give a little bit of context. So the numbers that we were sharing were that about 445,000 people then had filed for regular unemployment insurance. And of those, we had paid 245,000 people at least some regular unemployment benefits. That remaining number, the 200,000, is not undone work. So certainly some of the claims that we haven't been able to process or there's other issues, that's included in that number. But a huge amount of that number are claims that we've already worked and they've been addressed. Some of the biggest categories are there's about 73,000 of those claims at the time that we've reviewed, and people just weren't eligible for regular unemployment insurance. We know that a lot of that was because when pandemic unemployment assistance first came out, people were applying for both programs. So we received an application for regular unemployment insurance. We have to review to see if they're eligible and tell them, no, you're not. So thousands of those people are already applying for and even receiving benefits, but it's under the PUA program and we don't have the reporting available yet. We're still finalizing that. There's also about another 42,000 people out of that group who we processed their claim and they are eligible for benefits, but they never claimed a week. So unemployment insurance, I'll try not to get too technical. You file an initial claim and then seek benefits for each week. And we had a number of people, for instance, when some of the early actions to curb the pandemic were done, the schools were closed. So a lot of school employees filed claims for benefits. We analyzed them and determined that, yes, you're eligible for benefits. But when they discovered that they were receiving their full salary, they never actually claimed a week of benefits. So that's also about 42,000 of that group are people we've done the work, and if they stop getting paid or stop working and start filing weeks of benefits, we've already processed their claim and they could start receiving benefits. There's also about another 11,000 people in that group who, again, we've approved their claim, but the only week that they claimed so far is the first week, which currently in our system is reflected as the waiting week. We're working on that, but right now. So again, as soon as they file the next week of benefits, they would receive a payment if they meet the weekly requirements. And then also, I think at the time it was about 19,000 of those were claims that had been filed just in the past few weeks. 3 weeks is kind of the normal time period during when we're not in a pandemic, from when somebody files an initial claim for benefits to when they can expect to receive their first payment. So once you take out the people who just aren't eligible, but we've already told them that for the regular unemployment program, and the people that are eligible, but they just haven't claimed a week that we can send them a check for yet, and the ones that were recently filed, it's still a lot of people waiting for us, but it's a drastically lower number than that 200,000.
So right now, about 460,000 traditional unemployment insurance claims have been filed.
Correct.
460, okay. You know, I think for a lot of people, they look at this situation, and I know you're the brand new director, you weren't doing this prior. They look at this and they go, what a mess. We've been in this situation since the middle of March. You know, healthcare officials and a governor have known about this for, maybe perhaps a month to 2 months prior to that, how can we still be in this situation? How can people still not be receiving unemployment insurance in June?
And it is incredibly frustrating and well beyond that. We know that people really need these benefits. I think the context is important. So if you go back to the beginning of March, the unemployment insurance program, we were dealing with record low unemployment in the state. The economy was growing. It was the lowest unemployment rate on record. And that's what we were staffed for. We received federal funding to administer the unemployment insurance program. And we have had several years of not receiving adequate funding from the federal government, even under their own funding formula. So we went from that to facing more people needing benefits than we had at the height of the Great Recession. And instead of having that take place over the course of about a year, like it did during the Great Recession, it took place over the course of just a few weeks. So there were a lot of things that we were able to do very quickly. We had an emergency rule out in mid-March that changed the regular eligibility requirements for unemployment insurance to reflect the fact that we were in very different circumstances. We started hiring people, we started training people, we redirected people that work for our agency and from other agencies to help out. One of the challenges is that, again, in normal times with just a regular unemployment program, it typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks to train a new employee how to process an unemployment insurance claim. So from the time we hire someone, if you look at mid-March when a lot of this started, we're not that much more beyond that now. We greatly accelerated our training to meet the current situation. So we have taken a lot of actions, but we were not prepared, and frankly, no state was prepared for the volume of claims and the complexity as all these new programs were created. One other thing I'll add is a number of people have been waiting for those federal programs, and those didn't actually exist even in law until March 29th. So people were filing then, or some people even before, hearing discussions about the programs, but we really couldn't start paying the benefits until we created the processes, training, hired people and trained them. So we know that people have been waiting too long, and we're really focused on getting them the benefits as quickly as we can.
Okay, stand by 1 second here. Just make sure this is still rolling. When you say inadequate funding from the federal government, OED has a trust fund and is sitting on, what was it, $80+ million worth of funding to help improve its antiquated system. What's that money going towards right now, and could that not be used previously or retroactively?
So the trust fund money that we have, and that's where that the 80 some odd $million is held, can only be used for certain purposes. The vast majority of it is only allowed by law to be used to pay benefits. The 80 something $million was money the state received to improve the program. Oregon has actually been able to hold on to that money. Most other states had to use their share to pay benefits to workers. Because Oregon has a good trust fund model, we didn't have to do that. We're holding on to that money. It's been earmarked for some time, and we are spending it to modernize our technology systems. That's an expensive endeavor to do, and we wanted to make sure that we had the funding to do that. The underfunding that I was talking about is the ongoing administrative costs to pay for people, for training, for equipment, all of those things that it takes to run the program. And that's something that we receive ongoing allotments from the federal government for. And over the past several years, we've received less than 75% of what the federal government formula shows we should need.
So the $80+ million for the trust fund traditionally was supposed to be used to pay Oregonians their benefits, but now you guys have kind of transitioned and you're trying to use that to modernize your systems.
I would characterize it a little bit differently. During the Great Recession, the federal government gave money to each state, and they could use it for a number of purposes. Most states ended up using it to pay benefits to workers because their trust funds weren't solvent. They didn't have enough money. Oregon wasn't in that situation, so we were able to save it to pay for modernizing the computer system. Many other states had to do private borrowing or get general fund allotments from their state when they wanted to upgrade their infrastructure. And Oregon decided to earmark that money to pay for what we knew needed to be done to upgrade the technology.
But have you upgraded the technology? Because we keep going back to this antiquated computer system.
We haven't upgraded it. We've made a number of additions, and we are in the process of selecting the vendor who will do the work to give us the new technology. This is a complex system to replace. And one of the things that we've done is spend a lot of time looking at what other states did when they upgraded their systems. And some of them had projects that went pretty well. A number of states spent millions or tens of millions of dollars trying to upgrade their systems and had failed projects, or at the end had a system that worked, but didn't work sufficiently to deal with the current crisis even. So if you look around the nation, there are plenty of states that have modern technology that are having different types of issues than Oregon is having, but still struggling to serve the public. We didn't want to spend that money and at the end have a system that wasn't supporting Oregonians.
But I guess you don't know unless you try, right? I mean, could we have maybe avoided some of the really problematic situations that we're dealing with in Oregon had we have spent that money on modernizing our system earlier?
I really don't know. It really depends on how it turned out. Again, if you look around the nation, there are many, many states that modernized, and some of them had to resort to paper applications during part of this process because their systems weren't stable, couldn't keep up with the volume of claims, or had other problems. And again, that's what we wanted to avoid. The ideal situation would be to have completed it with a great solution that could withstand all the new programs and all the new users. But having done this earlier by no means would have guaranteed that we would have a better system in place now. And frankly, part of our concern was making sure that we weren't rushing into the program and ending up with an inadequate system at the end. And we've been working with all of the state oversight groups that help make sure that state agencies are doing the right thing when they're modernizing systems, that they're being cautious and not rushing into a big effort like this and ending up with something that doesn't work well enough at the end.
And Project Focus 100, so you guys have obviously continued the surge hiring. You have processed, it was 43% of the 38,000 backlogged claims as of the end of May.
That's correct. We launched Project Focus 100 to really focus, as the name says, on the people who had been waiting the longest. Not everybody whose claim has been processed is receiving benefits, as we discussed, but nobody can receive benefits if their application isn't processed. And we really wanted to focus on the ones that had been waiting the longest and hadn't yet been processed. So we've had our most experienced employees working on those. And our target when we started this on May 29th, last Friday, was to process all of the 38,000 claims that were at that point unprocessed and to have them all done by June 12th. And we have amazing staff that are focused on getting that done as quickly as possible. And as you said, so far, we've already processed 43% of those.
And you've increased phone capacity, you've physically added more phones and more phone lines, you're increasing staffing, but why are people still getting busy signals or getting disconnected?
Both of those relate to people not being able to get through because we don't have enough people there to answer all the questions. And we had multiple hurdles to overcome to let everybody that needs to contact us get through. Our phone system was designed for really high claim levels like we saw in the Great Recession, and this is dwarfing that. So it wasn't built to withstand the number of people that are calling on us now. We did those things that you mentioned. We added phones, we added phone lines, we've added other capacity to the technology. And at the same time, we've been training people as quickly as we can and getting them the phone so that they can answer questions. It's been a balancing act of wanting to make sure people can get through to us, but also that when they can get through to us, that we can do something meaningful to give them some information. And we were just overwhelmed until we could get all of those pieces aligned, the infrastructure, the phones, the people, and the training. We've been working on that, and we're continuing to scale up quickly. And the early results so far from the Project Focus 100 of rededicating people towards those calls is showing initial promise. We know we need to get the phone lines even more stable and the wait times much lower, but it seems to be helping so far.
I know you're on a tight timeline. I'll ask a couple more questions. One being, when you talk about PUA being a separate line from traditional unemployment insurance, so many people that have to file for PUA have no idea who to call. I asked this question in the media briefing as well. What number do those people call? How can they connect with a human being?
So this is back to the challenge of not wanting to give people an access point where we couldn't help them. We are in the process of getting a PUA specific phone number available. We're testing it, and we don't want to announce it to the entire world until we're done with the testing and we're pretty sure that it will withstand the capacity of calls, because we know that there are lots of questions, but we're working on that hard. I know that our team is working, has been and continues to work today. So very soon we will have a phone number to publicly announce. We will put that everywhere where people can call in. Again, I want to set some realistic expectations. We know that people are really anxious for this information, and we do expect really high call volumes to start while we work through that kind of pent up demand. The other thing that we are doing also is outbound calls. When we're working on claims, the unemployment insurance system that we have normally sends mail out to ask for follow-up in many cases. And we're really trying to shift that and adapt our practices and to make outbound calls to people to get the information that we need so that they don't have to try to call in, and so that we can resolve the issues more quickly.
It just seems contradictory in a sense, because you guys send letters to folks that apply for PUA confirming, then you say, call this number if you have questions. It's the employment department's number. It's not really the PUA number. Why didn't we have a PUA number set up when the program was rolled out? And this could have we could have bypassed all of these jammed up phone lines.
So I don't think it would have helped the phone lines. I'm not going to say that we did everything that in retrospect would have been perfect. We stood the PUA program up in about 4 weeks from not even being a law that existed. And we were rushing to get it going as quickly as we could to get benefits paid. And we knew when we launched it, and we tried to share, I know that I told people that we know when we go live, this is not an ideal setup for a new program, but we want to at least be able to start paying benefits to some people as quickly as we can. And we're doing lots of needed follow-up that is absolutely essential, like creating the phone lines, creating better communication, creating required reporting and other things that, now about 2 months after the law was first created, we're able to roll out. But it does take time to create all of those things, to add the phone lines, the infrastructure, and to get enough trained people.
Okay, last question for you. Some people may look at this, who have been waiting for their unemployment benefits for 11 weeks now, may look at this and say, okay, so the director resigned. What does that really do for the broken system? How can we really rest assured that this new director is going to get us the money that we need to put food on the table for our families? I mean, what would you tell people about your new leadership?
What I can commit to is I'm committed to communicating as much as possible about where things are. That's why we're working on some of those outbound calls and the other efforts to at least inform people about the status of their claim as much as we can, even if we can't process all of them overnight, which really is not feasible with just the historically never seen before number of people filing claims. A lot of people, if they at least know what the next step is, have some assurance that their claim has been received, and have a general idea of when things will be resolved, that's at least some help. And we're committed to doing that. We also are taking every step that we can. We've received so many ideas from the public, from individual people who are seeking benefits, from legislators. We are looking at everything. Where I mentioned that we're looking for volunteers from other agencies to help out. We're hiring quicker than the agency has ever hired in the past, and training quicker. So we are absolutely focused on getting everything done as quickly as we can. It will still be a challenge, but I'm committed to making it work and to being very open about what we're doing and what the results are.
Okay, and hopefully people that have been waiting the longest can get the help they need.
Absolutely, and we are focused right now specifically on helping those people that have been waiting the longest. That's what the Focus 100 was all about, was singling those claims out and having our most experienced employees work on them.
Okay, well, as I talked to people this morning, they said they wish you the best of luck because you've inherited a bit of a challenge. So I I wish you the best of luck as well, and I appreciate your time.